and engaging hip-hop in activism work from Rock the Vote to, and I mentioned the self-destruction. What do you think the impact of those things have been? Or other efforts you want to talk about? I know you also were involved with the Essence Take Back the Music.
Yeah, I think with the Stop the Violence movement, there was quite a bit of things happening in New York City, and I'm not quite sure at that point in time, KRS-One's, it wasn't until later where he made, songs about the police.
Right.
Prior to that, it was about us killing one another.
Right.
And us committing atrocities on one another in areas that I think one of you mentioned, kids having to go now to other schools that are not in their neighborhood. And for us, a lot of the violence was happening in central places where other boroughs would come in from New York City. And unfortunately, KRS-One lost Scott the Rock. I mean, we all lost him, but that was his brother, his mentor, and somewhat like his father.
Right.
And so that was the impetus to that particular movement. And I think everyone involved at that point was sort of relieved that someone had taken the reins and said, it's about time that we address this. Whether or not it had an impact on the community during that time, I cannot say. I don't know the numbers, the statistics of what went down or what went up. But I can say that I hear on a continuous basis that today there needs to be a new Stop the Violence movement, which for me means that it needs to be this generation, because they have the ears and eyes of all, and can heavily influence communities around the world, not just this nation, but around the world, because violence is happening everywhere.
Yeah, true. Now, I think that, that was '89, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were seeing a surge definitely of incarceration of young people between 70 and like 90. By 90, we get to like 2 million people incarcerated in the country, right? 1 million of whom are black men. But we also did see, I think, as we started going to those 90s, and I would contribute this to that Stop the Self-Destruction album, was I think the mentality of people about crack cocaine using, I think was changed and impacted by some of those songs and some of that movement. And I just remember, like, it wasn't something that was like a good thing, right? And I remember you had done the song a little bit earlier than that, right? What is it? Georgie. Poor Georgie, that's right, that's right. Yeah, and so I mean, I think that I thought that stuff was really highly impactful to see those artists all together like that.
Well, you know what's crazy is during that time, we didn't glorify drugs.
Right.
It was like, this is a problem. You want to stay away from this.
Right.
And it wasn't until later where it becomes very popular to smoke, to drink, to pop ecstasy, to pop all of these, weird man-made scenarios. But I thought what was interesting, what you said about the East and the West and the difference, is the East Coast never thought for one moment to call a woman out of her name, to call her a bitch.
Right.
Like that was unheard of.
Yeah.
They held their women in high esteem. And it wasn't until NWA and some of the West Coast rappers, and that's the way they talked to their women and about their women. And not all of them, but a great deal of them, and enough of them to influence rappers on this coast, because I don't think it was until Biggie, really, that we begin to see and feel the change of how we're treated as women. And I know we're getting a little bit away from the violence, but to me it's all
I think it's absolutely connected.
Yeah, it's all around.
And I think that really what I want you to speak to, if you can, is what is the significance and the effectiveness that you see in the work that you do as when you bring that hip hop presence? Like, how does that add to the shift? Like, we saw hip hop inserted into campaigns. You've done some work with Rock the Vote. Like, do you think that is how, you know, can you measure the effectiveness?
I think it's effective. First off, kids just want to know that you're willing to communicate with them. You know, so a song that can do a bit of damage, a song that can do a bit of damage through people just hearing it is way different from someone coming into the community from the hip hop world and actually speaking to them.
Right.
So and then at that point they feel they're worth something. Okay, someone is talking to me about something that I haven't heard it delivered to me in this way from a hip hop artist. And so then the wheels begin to churn and they begin to change their mind about how they look at violence, or how as a young girl she should be spoken to, or a young boy how he should speak to other people. So I think hip hop by far is a strong way in which to communicate to these kids what it is that needs to happen next.
Right.
But it has to come from some knowledgeable hip hop artists.
Right. Now, one of the—
That was a segue.
Yeah, no, okay. I just want to ask you one last thing. One of the things that I often hear from people who aren't in hip hop is, how can hip hop have this positive effect when so much of the lyrics that people are hearing on the radio is this negativity? We just recently had this big uproar over Rick Ross and the rape lyric. So, like, how do you feel about that question? How can hip hop have an effect positively when it's seen as something that is negative?
Well, first off, there's all different types of hip hop, right? And so what is being pushed and promoted in mainstream media is a different type of hip hop. It's a hip hop I'd rather not be associated with.
Right.
However, there is a hip hop that exists that is that's the main goal of it is to educate our younger generation.
Right.
And speaking directly to them.
Right.
However, they have to feel as though they need to find it. See, I come from a hip hop where I found the hip hop that satiated me, whereas the hip hop that exists on mainstream is just being pushed and promoted and somewhat brainwashing our children, you know, that they hear the same records over and over again on radio, and most of what it is that would feed them and nourish them exists in an underworld where they have to go find it.
Right. Okay. So we're moving close to the time that we're going to start taking some questions, but we got some little bit of changes going on here. I want to get Jasiri to talk some, and then we're going to bring up the police chief, Will. Who is that? Where is he? All right, sir. I'm glad that you're here. We're going to bring you up. We're going to get you in a conversation. I just want to hear from you, Jasiri. Do you want to come take your seat at this point? Welcome to the police chief. We didn't know that he was going to be able to make it, so he was able to make it in for us after all. So it was already, we thought he was going to be here, and now he is here. So this is good, because I think it's going to make the conversation more rich. Jasiri, you have, as an artist, and I want you to talk about the artistry second. I want you to talk about your activism work in Pittsburgh. What made you and Paradise start One Hood?
Well, it was actually two incidences. The first was in Pittsburgh, we have what's considered kind of the worst neighborhood in Pittsburgh is a neighborhood called Homewood. So in this neighborhood, Homewood, it was 6 shootings in a 21-hour period. And the last 2 people were shot was a 3- and a 4-year-old girl. And at that point, you know, we felt like, and a lot of times what happens when something like that happens in our community is like we'll call a press conference or we'll call a meeting. And, you know, brother spoke to it, like, a lot of times those people who we really need to have this conversation with, they're not coming to no press conference or meeting.
Right.
So what we did was, instead of doing that, and One Hood is a coalition made up of you know, a group of like Muslims, Christians, black nationalists, political people, and was really all of us were kind of, we kind of had in common was like we're part of the hip hop generation. And so what we did was we called on our coalition. We took about 30 to 40 men and we walked the streets at night. And when we started walking the streets, like the response to the community was so great. It was to the point where, you know, women were like sending they like significant others like out, like hold on, you go down and talk with them dudes, you know, because they saw it, and you know, children were like, you know, so I mean, we got such a reaction that we started to do that on a weekly basis. You know what I'm saying? Not just in Homewood, in different communities, because we felt like, you know, if we don't show that we care, and our message was, you know, because it was like 30 of us, so, you know, we hit some corners, and some of the brothers that were there kind of were like, you know, like, what are y'all coming to do? And we were like, we're here to say we love you, we care about you, we care whether you live or die. Yeah. And this is that conversation that we were talking about that oftentimes we don't have with our young people. Like, we care. We have resources that they can get you, you know, if you would like to change your lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? Instead of waiting for them, we gonna wait for them all day to come to the church, come to the mosque, come to the meeting. They're not coming. We gotta go to them. Like, if we love them or care about them, this is what we have to do. The second incident was we had a police officer in Pittsburgh point a gun at a 7-year-old girl and said he was going to blow her brains out. And what happened was, instead of going to the driver's side, he came to the passenger side. He pulled a woman over who was on her way to her Little League football game. And when he came to the passenger side, the little girl was in the passenger seat and he had his gun drawn. So the little girl sees the gun, she tries to get out of the seat belt because she's afraid, and he's like, tell this little girl to stop moving. She doesn't stop moving, I'm gonna blow her brains out. And there were 5 witnesses. And, you know, and so what happened in that situation was they charged the mom with disorderly conduct because she's screaming for Jesus, because she's thinking like her daughter's about to get killed. So she's, you know, almost at a hysterical level. So we began to rally the community around that issue, around, you know, protecting our community, protecting our children. So the charges of disorderly conduct were dropped against her, but the police officer was not, you know, it was basically, the judge actually said he did not believe, despite the witnesses, that this officer did that. He said he drew his gun and he pointed it at the ground, which I don't know why you would do that. Like, why would the ground's not, you know. So 6 months later, that same officer ended up killing a mentally disturbed man. You know what I'm saying? But it was really these 2 incidences that caused us, that galvanized us to start One Hood and to go out in the community. Now, we started the Media Academy because what we began to realize was that we can't always be reactionary. You know, sometimes you get stuck into this, like, something happens, you react. Something happens, you rally. Something happens, and it's like, so you're always like running to the next big thing, right, fire, you trying to, so we said, well, we need to be proactive. And we saw, you know, how powerful hip hop is as a draw, as a tool. So in Pittsburgh, they did this study of how black men are portrayed in the media. And the study said that 96% of the time that they portrayed us in the media, it's crime or sports.
And that was a Heinz Foundation.
Yeah, the Heinz Foundation and the Pew Center. So we went to the Heinz Foundation and said, you know, we've had success, like you said, independently creating our own media and our own hip hop. We can teach young people, one, to be media literate, because a lot of the images, like we just talked about, that are being presented, you know, in mainstream hip hop to our young people are really there to sell products. And I want you to understand, like, because sometimes I think we put the blame on the artist and we leave out the corporate interests. So an artist like myself that does, you know, I guess you would say positive or conscious and intelligent lyrics, the record industry has told me we can't market you. You know, we don't know how to market you, you know what I'm saying? But if I was talking about, but then give an artist like Chief Keef $6 million. You know, and who's talking about, you know, the reality of what happens in Chicago. I'm from that neighborhood in Chicago originally. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, glorifying crime, violence, you know, drug use, drug abuse as a 16-year-old that's really trying to respond to the oppression that he's under. So now if I'm a rapper, what am I going to talk about? You know what I'm saying? So you have, you know, Rick Ross is college educated. Lil Wayne is college educated. 2 Chainz has a college degree. You know what I'm saying? But if they begin to rap intelligently, they're not going to get the $10 million investment. They're not going to get the marketing budget. They're not going to get the look on BET and MTV, which is owned by Viacom, which is another corporation.
Right.
So it's corporate interests that are intent on shaping, especially young black men, in a certain light.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, well, first we have to get our young people to understand that. You know what I'm saying? And it's really, you know, to kind of feed the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
And then also that we can create our own media. So if I don't like how I'm being portrayed on MTV and BET, you mentioned Kathy Cohen and the Black Youth Project.
Right.
They did a study and they asked young people, and it was 80 to 90% of young people did not like the images that how they were being portrayed in popular hip hop culture. Think about that. And so now we have cameras, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, like we can tell our own story. And we can tell a truer story about how we're portrayed. And so that was the idea about the Media Academy. And we, you know, we really look at, and I'll end with this. A lot of times we get upset at like what young people are rapping about. You know what I'm saying? Well, they're only going to rap about what they know. Like if we're not actively involved in teaching them, giving them books, giving them, this is what the hip hop in the 80s and 90s did for me.
Right.
They were telling me like, read this book.
Absolutely.
You know, listen to this person. You know what I'm saying? This is somebody that you should check out. And so I started reading and getting into my own consciousness because of what hip hop was telling
Absolutely.
me. But if we don't go to our young people and say, here's a book that you should read. You know, in our Media Academy, we give the ISIS papers, you know, by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. It's my understanding that you can't really understand and dissect media without understanding white supremacy and its effect on our mind. You know, so we're able, that's what we do. And so what we see is when we give them that conscience, we're really trying to make the next generation of conscious artists. We're intentionally the next generation of thought leaders. But in order to do that, we have to make an investment in the young people. Sir. And if they see schools closing, they're like, well, they ain't trying to invest in my education. Right. If they see, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, the relationship with the police is very, you know, it's just like you said, confrontational and not a loving relationship. Right. Oh, that's not an investment. Well, but I can go, you know, there might be some people on the block that are willing to invest in me. Right. That are willing to give me money to do. That's just natural. Yes. You're going to go where you think you're wanted and loved. You see what I'm saying? Right. And so we have to begin to create environments for our children to show that you're wanted and loved and that we're going to invest our money, time, and resources in you because we really believe you're our future. Okay. Another question that we're just, you know, just follow some context. I don't know if I did an interview with Rhymefest a couple of weeks ago in Ebony. Right. Yeah. And one of the things he said is what you're saying, but I think he added another layer to it in terms of the relationship between the corporations beyond the music industry corporations and what's happening in terms of hip hop. And he talked about Chief Keef getting this $6 million advance for a record deal, and he said that the interesting thing about this to him was Chief Keef didn't have a track record of selling any records. And now one of the things in the music industry or any business, or you could go to a foundation. If you don't have a track record of doing anything, they're not funding you. Right. So Rhymefest thought it was interesting that here is a guy who has no track record, and so he said that he felt it was basically Chief Keef was a good, well, he said that Interscope gave him the deal. Interscope is owned by GE, and that this was a good promotion for the business that GE is in, which includes the private prison industry. Yes. So he talked about these relationships, so I thought that was really interesting. I want to ask you a follow-up question, and then we're going to get the Chief Bill into the conversation. But I wanted to ask you, and I think this is really important. You guys work with the police in, in some of the programs you do. You work with foundations. Yes. You've been in the August Wilson Cultural Center. I want you to talk real honestly about the successes, or what I would call the triumphs, and really the pitfalls. When somebody is trying to say, you know what, I want to change my community, I want to be involved, I'm going to take a proactive stance. Like, what are some of the problems that you've encountered, trying to do this work? Well, the first thing is, and I would encourage, like, if anybody, a good friend of mine is founder of Occupy the Hood. His name is Malik Rasan. And his new slogan, y'all know, his new slogan is do some ish. Do something. You know what I'm saying? So when we started One Hood, like our idea wasn't to get to become a nonprofit to get funding. Like that wasn't in our mind.
Right.
We just wanted to go out and do something. So we went out and started to do things in the community, like with just on our own, volunteering with no budget. And how we got the relationship with the foundations is they saw us always in the community, always working with our young people and having success with no budget.
Right.
So then they began to say, well, man, is there a way, can we talk to y'all? Can we, because they were giving money to a lot of non-for-profits and they weren't getting any results, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I would just encourage you, if you have an idea or something you want to do, don't wait to write a grant, just start doing it. You know what I'm saying? Start getting those results. You know what I'm saying? That's the first thing.